Good morning, boys, and welcome to Online Chapel here at Rathkill College. Well, boys, ironically, just a day after you watched my last chapel video with a sermon on You Are Not in Control, again, I had to learn the lesson that I am not in control. Because on the Wednesday following that sermon, I broke my Achilles tendon in an accident over in Palmerston North. It was a reasonably ordinary day, just doing ordinary kinds of things. I was in the rugby museum there with some of the first 11 hockey boys, and we were trying out the scrum machine, and I decided to give it a go and gave it a really hard push, and it was just too much without warming up, and my Achilles broke. So an ordinary event, doing nothing that you would assume was very high risk, has resulted in what's going to be 6 weeks of me being on crutches and in a cast, and a lot longer of rehab and a long time before I'm fully able to return to normal activity. It's just another reminder that I'm not in control, that things will happen that are out of my control. It's also a reminder to me that I'm getting older. When I searched up these Achilles tendon injuries, it said that one of the common factors is middle-aged men often break their Achilles tendon, and I had to acknowledge to myself that I'm middle-aged now. I'm not young anymore. And it's injuries like this and a whole lot of other things that happen as you get older that remind you that there's something else coming on the horizon. A little voice starts to whisper in the back of my head, in the back of my mind, and it probably whispers for all of us at different times in our lives. It's something that we try to avoid and are able to keep away from ourselves, to push down for most of our lives. But at times like this, it becomes more and more apparent that I am going to die. One day, I'm going to die. And that, boys, is the fifth and final lesson of initiation into adulthood that Indigenous cultures teach their young people, that you are going to die. The reality is, as much as possible, we avoid thinking about and talking about death. Nowhere are we more uncomfortable than when we are faced with someone who has just suffered the death of someone close to them. Nowhere do I perhaps feel more uncomfortable, and have I seen people be more uncomfortable when confronted with someone whose parent, child, spouse, or someone close to them has died. I've seen people avoid that person completely because they don't know what to say. They're uncomfortable, or fumble with what to say. And just as an aside, boys, because I see this done so badly, here's a quick few pointers on what to do when talking to someone who's recently lost someone, especially if they've lost them in tragic circumstances. The first thing is, don't avoid that person. Don't cross the street. Don't walk around them. If it's someone you would normally have spoken to, and even if it isn't someone you would normally have spoken to, if someone has lost someone, then it's appropriate to go up to them and say to them, look, I'm very sorry. I've heard what's happened. I'm really sorry. If you are someone who is a friend of theirs, then it's probably appropriate to say, I just want to let you know that I'm here for you and to do whatever I can to support you. But then leave it at that. So many times, people in this situation try to put a positive spin on the situation and say something like, oh, but I'm sure this will all work out, or that it was meant to be, or people try to put some kind of meaning, especially onto a tragic death, when really there's nothing to say. There's nothing positive or nothing hopeful that you can really say in that situation to somebody who's lost someone in that way. And to do so is really kind of a selfish thing to do, because really what we're trying to do there is actually make ourselves feel more comfortable with the mystery and the horror of death. Because most of us, and probably all of us, until we've had a particular kind of experience, are afraid to face the reality of death. And when we see it in others, it reminds us that we are going to die. Much of our lives can be motivated by the denial of death, by trying to push away the thought that we are going to die one day. In fact, one writer that I read this week said that the heroic impulse, that impulse that many young men have to do something heroic, to be famous, to be strong, to be significant, to be remembered in some way, that impulse that many of us had is really motivated as an attempt to overcome death, to in some way cheat or outlast or overcome death. We want to live as if death isn't going to happen to us. In fact, some people would even say to me, oh, look, should you really be talking to young people about death? Is this really an appropriate thing to be talking to teenagers about? And in fact, it's something that most adults don't talk about lightly. Even older people don't talk about it. No one really wants to talk about this topic. But the reality is, it is going to happen to you. More than anything else in your life, they say there are two things you can be sure of: death and taxes. And even if you never pay taxes, one day you will die. You are going to die. It's going to happen to you, and it could be any time. In fact, it could be today. But boys, there's actually a real benefit from facing the reality of our death. The reason that Indigenous cultures get young people to face the reality that they are going to die, that you are going to die, is that when we get in touch with death, we also get in touch with the sacredness of life. When we know that life is limited, that it isn't going to go on forever, that we don't have unlimited time, that one day all of this will end, then we see the sacredness, the specialness, the holiness of life. You know, boys, I recently had my own near-death experience, if you like. One thing I like to do is surf. And it's pretty common in surfing that when you come off a wave or when you get dumped by a wave, that if it's a large wave, you'll get rolled underwater for a while. And you have to be able to hold your breath for a while. And you usually just hold your breath knowing that eventually you are going to come up to the surface. But sometimes it gets near the end of your breath and you think, if I don't come up now, or if I don't come up soon, I'm going to be in trouble. If this wave doesn't stop soon and let me up, then I might drown. And that very thing happened to me about a month ago. I was surfing, I took a big wave. When eventually it closed out on me and took me under and rolled me, I got to the point where I could no longer hold my breath. And I thought, this is it. This is the moment I feared. I wondered, am I going to drown now? And I actually gasped underwater, took in a mouthful of breath. Luckily, I swallowed it rather than breathed it. I think that helped. And not long after that, I popped up and was able to vomit it all back out. But moments like this make me realize that I don't know when I'm going to die, and you don't know when you're going to die. And when you confront the fact that you will die and it could be at any time, hopefully it can cause you to treat this life as the gift, the special gift that it is sacred, that there is so much to appreciate about life. That even just to be here in this moment, breathing, feeling the sensations of wind and warmth and human touch, that all of these things are a gift. All of these experiences are sacred, and one day they will come to an end. Sometimes my wife and I play a little game with each other where we say, if you knew you were going to die today, or if you knew you were going to die at the end of this week, what would you do differently? What would you do right now? And whenever we're sort of stressed with the worries of the world, we ask each other this question. And then all of a sudden, when we really think about that question, what's really important comes into focus. And one of us will usually say something like, well, I would grab my children and hold them close. I would get around the people I loved and just tell them how much I loved them. I would spend my final moments with those people, just appreciating them and being with them. And then all the other things that we worry about, all the finances and all the goals that we have and the things we think we want to achieve with our lives, they all disappear when we confront the fact that we will die. And the things that really matter, the love that we have in our life, the people that we have in our life, they are what is important. It's those things that matters, the people that we belong to. And so, knowing that you are going to die is an important truth. It's an important lesson. It's worth thinking about. It's worth imagining what it will be like to have this life end, because it puts everything into perspective. It helps you see the sacredness of your life.